If we are serious about climate change, I think it would be extremely risky to bet on these few hipsters in Silicon Valley who think they rule the world.
You're someone from Stanford University. That's like winning the lottery for us. And you decided to come back to Bangladesh. Or come to Bangladesh, actually.
Most of the innovations which have come, they don't work in Bangladesh. So you want to do a Hyperloop from Dhaka to Chittagong? I think we have different problems to tackle. So I'm not saying we should all stay here and only, the problem. And we should have a wide perspective. Bangladesh has 5 million of those electric three-wheelers. BYD, Tesla, they are just over 5 million in the whole world. Bangladesh alone has that number of EVs here. Lead poisoning, the level of people having cancer, it's incredibly high. But who understands, I have cancer because of this? You fall, but then you also get up again. And usually then you are a bit bigger. I don't want to give up. I can see the land. And as long as you see it, then you know that you can get there.
Hello everyone, welcome to the first episode of Anwar Ishfaq Presents How to Start a Startup featuring BUEDF. Today we have a very special guest with us who we have been trying to get hold of for the past, 3 months. But finally he's here and we can't wait to hear from Dr. Sebastian Groh. Hello sir, thank you so much for doing this. For those of you who don't know who Dr. Sebastian Groh is, he's the managing director and founder of Solshare, a climate tech company, whose recent, total funding was $7.8 million till date. But more importantly, he's a professor at our BRAC University. Even more importantly, he's someone who's completely an outsider to Bangladesh, which is why I thought that he would be our perfect guest for today's theme of why Bangladesh. So sir, I'm sure you're aware whenever you talk with any students like us, the dream for the past 15 years or so has been to leave Bangladesh, go abroad to a foreign university and hopefully settle there. You're someone from Stanford University. That's like winning the lottery for us. And you decided to come back to Bangladesh. Or come to Bangladesh, actually. So what was your motivation for that?
Well, thanks first of all for having me. Pleasure being here. As you said, I have a shared or two hats. It's the university and from the entrepreneurship sector. Since you mentioned that, last week I've been to China and I joined a workshop which was called The Future of Education and the Role of AI and whatnot. And the professor who gave the workshop was from Stanford.
Okay.
And he addressed those high school students in an international IB school in China. And he gave all these examples of students from developing countries who did something pretty cool out of the box and then eventually ended up at Stanford. And so he gave this example from Professor Prakash. Now, Professor Prakash is a professor at Stanford now. It's also at the D School and the Design School, which is famous for and brings up so many entrepreneurs. And he told the story of him when he was a teenager in an Indian village, no electricity, nothing. He invented, so they had very poor medical facilities, and he invented from a children's toy, he invented a machine to separate the blood into its parts so that you can diagnose certain diseases, and that would cost a couple $100, this tool, and he made it for a couple dollars. The end of the story was he ended up in Stanford and became a professor. And then I asked him, hang on, tell me something. How would you rate the innovation capacity of Prakash, the boy in the Indian village, and Professor Prakash at Stanford University now? And he hesitated. And the point was that he was like, what's your point? And I was like, the point I'm trying to make is that the closer you are to a problem, if you're exposed to something day in and day out, the higher the likelihood that you come up with a really good solution. And let me underline that when I was an Ignite fellow in 2013 at Stanford. What is an Ignite fellow? It's basically PhD students who find out something interesting in their studies, in their research, in their empirical data, and then Stanford teaches you to become an entrepreneur and to create a company out of that. Now, I discussed my idea back then with my professor at Stanford, who was also from India. That's why I gave that example. And then he said, "Look, it was in early days of trying to coin Solshare's business model." And he said, "Look, then at midnight, we'll automatically through the smart grid switch on the washing machine."
Okay.
And I looked at him and I said, "Sir, when was the last time you were in India? How many rural villages do you know where someone has a washing machine?" Oh. And this is just a simple example, but it tells a much bigger story. And sorry, I'm also a professor, so long answer, so you need to interrupt me. Why Bangladesh?
Yes.
So
Closer to the problem.
Closer to the problem.
Right.
I could not come up with a good product, neither in Stanford, nor in I'm originally from Germany, nor in Berlin. When Solskjaer developed the first product, which you could argue had product market fit, was when we hired a bunch of engineers who were from villages with exactly these problems we were trying to solve.
I see.
Before, it did not work. It was over-engineered. It wasn't the right fit. A myriad of problems. So, yes, you say you're not you personally, but you say many Bangladeshis' life dream is to go to Stanford, and that's fair.
Or to go abroad. Right?
Yeah, let's be a bit more ambitious.
Yeah. I think Stanford is too ambitious for us.
But okay, fine. But your goal shouldn't be to go to Stanford. Your goal should be to come up with something so amazing that your points doesn't matter. What stands out in your application, in your essay you have to write, is what you did, what you created. That should be the goal. And because if you have to choose, okay, should I study for my SATs or should I create something awesome? I would always go to create something awesome. But don't. I hope not that some of the parents who may be watching this are blaming me now.
No, I think that's a big cultural thing for us. Getting those grades. Like we're very obsessed with that. So yeah,
I know that.
Exactly.
I'm teaching a course, and students are so obsessed. And it's like, I'm teaching social entrepreneurship. I was like, what do you care about the grade I'm giving you at the end of the semester? That has nothing to do with the intention of my course. I want you to create a fascinating business model, which you hopefully implement. Who cares what grade do you have? But yeah, I'm learning. So
yeah, I think we look at it as getting those KPIs, right?
Yes, yes. KPIs are also important, no doubt about it. Yeah, I'm not saying that you should slack there. Yeah.
I think that's why we're a bit more analytical in that sense. But yeah,
fair enough.
Getting close to the problem source is what leads to innovation.
Yes, it leads to well, many things lead to innovation, but it leads to better innovation, I would argue. The closer to we all know the saying, necessity is the mother of innovation. And I think that's largely true. And the big problem I see here is that the whole world, when you look at where capital flows, it's very skewed towards certain places. Silicon Valley, lots of Tel Aviv, Berlin, Paris. We have in the whole Shenzhen area is more happening, or at least something in Asia.
Yeah.
But many people say this is the decade of Asia, especially when it comes to in the climate space. And if we are serious about climate change, I think it would be extremely risky to bet on these few hipsters in Silicon Valley who think they rule the world, to come up with a solution which might or might not work for us. And if you look closer, most of the innovations which have come, they don't work in Bangladesh. So what do you want to do with a hyperloop in Dhaka? And point is even that the thing doesn't work at all, but even if it did, right? So you want to do a hyperloop from Dhaka to Chittagong? I think we have different problems to tackle.
So, sir, I think a lot of these projects like Hyperloop and others are sort of marketing gimmicks that we all, students especially, are very susceptible to, right? So how do you sort of push that? Okay, these are very marketing oriented problems, but there are real problems that needs to be addressed. Where is the, sort of the spokesperson for that?
No, I mean, the Hyperloop is probably a fascinating technical problem, right? I
Very
mean, what
sci-fi.
Sorry?
Very sci-fi. Right?
Yeah,
Very,
and it's fascinating, right? It's fascinating to figure out how to populate Mars. I don't doubt that. But the bigger question is, can we afford it? And have we done enough for Plan A or Planet A, so to speak? And how many resources should flow to these kind of things versus to the real problems, to the very real problems which people here and elsewhere are experiencing day in and day out? And shouldn't more money flow to those people? Because again, they are exposed to it, they come up with the best solutions. But when we look at the data, most of the money flows to North America, and the innovations coming out from there, they don't blow me away.
Sure. With that in mind, which problem do you think like we should tackle, especially our generation, especially in context of Bangladesh?
Well, I'm very biased, right? I will tell you climate, and then second climate, and then third climate. So, but I mean, this is a series of podcasts, right? So you will have more guests who can speak, I think, to the other sectors. But I wouldn't dare to speak about health or fintech because I'm not an expert on that. But I know a thing or two about climate, and I do believe that while we have a lot of climate change adaptation NGO driven work, we have, and it's gotten better in the last 2-3 years, better, but we come from a very low level. For the longest time I had trouble fundraising for Solshare, because international investors would look at me and would say, so who are your competitors in Bangladesh? And whenever you can't say something to that question, then it's either you didn't study your market properly, or the investor says, okay, what you're doing doesn't make sense, because if it did, there would be someone else. So luckily this has changed a bit, and I do believe that competition is good, but we are still far from. I think we need a lot more happening in the climate space. And if you think about it from a bigger picture, with the graduation, a lot of these development funds, and with everything which is going on right now, a lot of these NGOs and UN and other DFIs and development organizations, they are going to feel more already, and will increasingly feel in the future. There's a bit of a reckoning. So this time of cheap money there, or grants, I think is not over, but it's significantly reduced. So we will need more private sector capital, and so we will need more climate startups. And I think things are happening, things are moving in this direction, but I think there's a lot of scope.
Sure. With that, how do you get investors to sort of make climate startups appealing? Because from their perspective, it's a very low margin business usually.
Why would it be low margin?
The solutions, the customers, it's, if you're trying to solve like a big scale problem, your customer would usually be the government, right? And trying to get that customer, I feel like it's very difficult for startups.
Yeah. With everything, I don't recommend the government as your customer. I don't even recommend some of the larger NGOs, UN organizations, maybe, because for a startup, they are, with all due respect, they're a terrible customer, because they pay late and infrequent, which is all the bad things for cash flow. So no, so I think then we are approaching the problem from the wrong end. Why would I target the government or these organizations? Let me borrow a line from late Salim ul Haq, who arguably was probably the most prominent climate adaptation advocate and researcher the world has seen. And he was here from Bangladesh. Unfortunately, he passed away a while ago. He said, because he was asked, climate mitigation is easy because solar is sexy and all this works, right? But adaptation is hard, because it's a bit softer, it's a bit more indirect and whatnot. And he said, why? If there is a huge problem for a large number of people that you are solving, you will find money there. if you really solve the problem. But to really solve the problem, you need to really understand it. And sitting in New York, it will not work. It may work, but I think the odds are stacked against you already.
Sure. So coming back to the question,
Sorry.
what are which challenges do you think students should head on? And sir,
Yeah.
be specific, I guess. Like I'm thinking about which problem should I tackle, so that's why. Please.
I think we should think in a way, what are the things we feel like in our everyday lives? Or let's say during Eid you went to your village. I don't know whether you did, but maybe you did. I'm sure many of who are listening went last week to, so we are right after Eid right now, right? For Kobani, Eid went to their village. What are the things you feel that are broken there? And start from there. And then, if this is broken for this person, are there maybe another 100,000, million? And how could we fix that? And see, you may have the exposure from your village, you have the exposure from Dhaka, maybe you have already traveled abroad. So I'm not saying we should all stay here and only the problem, and we should have a wide perspective and should let this guide and influence us, but then really design specifically for that problem. So I think if we come with the solution, and you know this, you have the solution, you try to find your problem, that's usually already a very good recipe for failure. But if you start with the problem and look around you, okay, what is broken? What is really bad? What causes huge cost burden, whatever that is? And you can quantify that, and you find a fix, and you can quantify your fix. I think then you're onto something. But specific, I mean, I'm not going to tell you, okay, invent a new XYZ, right? I don't think that's how it works.
I see.
So we always think about, oh, if I only had an idea. Let's turn it around. Let's really find a problem which we think we really understand better than anybody else, ideally. We really dig deep and we are really passionate about. Then we can start with the ideas, not the other way around.
So, sir, this was sort of your early days at Solshare, right? You started with the problem.
So I did it wrong. So what I did, and I think that's the more interesting part, is I was exactly like what you said in the beginning. I wanted to get into Stanford. Now, Stanford, as a criterion for this Ignite Fellowship, you had to be an entrepreneur. But I was not. Nor did I ever have a plan to be ever one. I actually did not like the idea of being one, because I figured this to be incredibly hard. Everything you have to create from scratch, and how nice is it if you just walk into an office and everything works, right? Like the printer, the lead working, everything's working, right? But in order to get into Stanford, I had to pretend to be an entrepreneur, and I had to come up with a fancy idea. So I did that. Problem was that once I got there, I got so entrenched into the idea and digging deeper into the problem that I got carried away, and that was in 2013. So now, 12 years later, I'm still working on that idea and on that problem, which is called Solshare.
So can you explain to us what Solshare does?
Sure. So if you look at Bangladesh in terms from a perspective, on a macro perspective, what's happening? Unless Bangladesh seriously embraces the energy transformation, the country will have an extremely hard time to attract foreign direct investment. And you probably, when you read the newspaper nowadays, it's all over. Oh, we don't get any FDI. That's key to develop. Why am I saying that? First of all, if you graduate, all these poverty development funds will dry out, and they're drying out anyways, unfortunately, given what the state of the world right now. But climate will be there, even so some people don't buy into this, but the majority of the world has a consensus that this is probably the greatest threat to humanity, and that we need to tackle that head on. And funds are flowing increasingly there. So, but Bangladesh, most of the income is from the RMG export. Now, the European brands all have their climate targets. If they cannot tackle their targets because in Bangladesh the grid is too dirty and they don't have the ability to cut their carbon emissions, they will move their production. If they move their production, which is 80% of the export, the whole economy will be going under pressure. So yes, one thing you could say, oh, then we should diversify. Yes, absolutely. But we should also make sure that those brands can hit their climate targets. So what Solshare is doing is, one thing is we are helping those brands to cut their emissions in their value chain, in their supply chain, which they're sourcing a lot of the garments and textiles from here. So we're putting a lot of solar on the roofs of those factories. We call that solar roof, or rooftop for the commercial and industrial sector. We're working with other decarbonization techniques in terms of energy efficiency, heat recovery for those factories. That is a climate change effort and is very, very profitable. Besides that, and now I'm getting a bit technical, is if you look at Bangladesh's electricity sector, if you put a lot of solar out there right now, that will sound good, but it will not really do the trick. And why is that? The peak load meaning when most of the people use electricity in Bangladesh, is not during the day, but in the evening. Why? Because it's household driven. Why is that? Because most of the factories have their own power plants on site, meaning a diesel generator, a gas generator, and so forth. So the demand on the grid is largely driven by the household sector, which is then means peak load is 7, 8, 9 p.m. That's when the sun does not shine. So unless you can store the electricity, you're not really solving the problem. Now, storage, we all know, is very expensive. So here is, and that's really what I think is the essence of Solshare, to come up with smart ways to solve these kind of problems. You can put big batteries to do this as storage, and I think the country should do that. This is the traditional way of solving it. But it's going to be expensive. But you can also go smart about it and look what are the resources which are already there, and that's kind of the philosophy of Solshare. Can we build smart business model based on existing resources? Now, Bangladesh has 5 million of those electric three-wheelers, the Mishuks and the easy bikes. Just BYD, Tesla, they are just over 5 million in the whole world. And Bangladesh alone has that number of EVs here. This is a huge success, which nobody recognizes. Oh, not nobody, but there is a few people out there whose car got scratched, and now they are shouting. And now, overnight, suddenly, we need to destroy publicly with the media the poor fella's vehicle. Not smart. EVs are looked at a piece of the puzzle of the sustainability puzzle, and for some reason, these vehicles are not considered EVs; they are considered a nuisance, while they are the backbone of the transportation sector of this country. And I think they are pretty cool. Could they be better? Of course. Could they be safer? Of course. But let's do that instead of just publicly destroy them. Do we need standards? Do they need a plate? Do they need to be registered? Yes to all. How can we facilitate that? So that's what we are working on. Do they use batteries which kill large amount of people? They do. They have lead acid batteries. Now, whose fault is that? That's the fault of the lead battery industry. For instead of recycling those batteries formally, which is more expensive, they're taking a shortcut. We know shortcuts here very well. And recyclers have informally, the lead goes into the water, and kaboom, Bangladesh turns out one of the countries most affected, actually third most affected country in the world to lead poisoning. Lead poisoning is a secret, silent killer. You can't see it. You take it when you have your water and you have your food. And there's actually been some really good research recently being published in The Lancet, which is arguably like one of the most reputed journals, which went really deep into Bangladesh. They took the measurements of the ground. In those places where they dumped those batteries and informally recycled them, the levels of lead poisoning, the level of people having cancer, it's incredibly high. But who understands, oh, I have cancer because of this?
Why do you think the public isn't really aware of all this?
I wasn't aware of this. This is not easy. These are complicated causalities because the lead in the water, you take it, to prove this is not easy. And this only came out earlier this year. I mean, there were people who knew this before. I think Pure Earth was just an NGO here, which I think is really, really good. They have been doing a lot of research on this and supported that research as well. But I mean, that's part of it. We have to get those messages out because we need to be aware, what is it that is killing us really? And in this case, unfortunately, literally killing us. And how can we solve this? And this is where the market is failing, right? If these lead acid factories can bypass the formal recycling, and then with this artificially lowering the cost of lead acid batteries, and with that preventing better technologies coming to the market, and that's something where we have to raise our voice, and we have to say, okay, this cannot happen. This needs to be in. There are rules against it, but they're not being enforced enough. And I did the professor trap. I didn't really answer your question. I'm a very, very bad podcast partner here. No, so Solshare is working on replacing 5 million of those lead acid battery sets for lithium batteries. They are more expensive, but they last longer. So it's a financing problem. So how do we solve this? We make sure that the banks and microfinance institutions are willing to finance them. How are they willing to finance? If you can remotely control the asset, you can become an asset-backed financing. So I can remotely switch off the battery. I can remotely tell when the battery should charge or discharge. I can tell how well the battery is performing, how long it will last. All this information is necessary for the credit risk to go down so that these financial institutions are willing to finance them. Once we get 5 million batteries, let's say the maximum, into the market, Solshare will be bigger than Summit Power. Summit Power's generation assets here is, I think, a little over 20%. We'll be able on the storage side, without owning a single battery. So it's a little bit like Airbnb being the biggest hotel without owning a single hotel or bed, right? Without owning those batteries, but just because we can manage them, we can buffer 30% of the national grid. That's huge.
This is all Bible like let me skip this.
Not let me scale this. I wasn't that far for the first one. So investment is different types of risk, right? So you have your own pocket money as what you call it, like bootstrapping with your own resources. Maybe with more than pocket money. Then you have your friends and family. Then you have also non-dilutive funding. Non-dilutive means it's not equity. It doesn't dilute your equity, your position, your ownership of your company. That can be grants. That's how we started. It can also be debt, which is very dangerous because if you don't have paying customers, then how do you pay back the loan? So that you be careful. It doesn't work for every case. So our first funding was actually my PhD scholarship. So my PhD scholarship was designed to live in Germany. But 2014, things in Bangladesh have cost a lot, still do, but especially then have cost a lot less than in Germany. So I had a lot of money left from that scholarship. So I used that to bootstrap. The first funding, so to speak, was a grant from. Well, I'll tell you how I got it. No, I don't tell you the name from whom we got it, so to be on the safe side. So I basically said, we had the idea of Solshare, sharing electricity between solar home systems and building a grid out of those solar home systems, which I still think is fascinating and fantastic, but not under the current policy. That's a different podcast.
No, when I first heard of the idea, it is so simple.
Oh yeah, ideas are cheap. Ideas are cheap.
I'm no, it's innovative at the same time. It's so obvious.
Yes. Yes.
So
ideas are cheap. So what I needed to demonstrate that this idea can actually be implemented is I needed to show them a box, which ideally could buy and sell electricity. That's turned out to be extremely difficult actually from an engineering problem. So, but I had a pitch the next day. So I said, can you give me a box that has buttons, which ideally blink, and write buy and sell and write it in Bangla. I mean, that you can give a fifth grader. This is an art project. Put a battery inside and you make it blink. So with that blinking box, which had no PCB inside, there was no, it's just a battery and the lights, like a Christmas tree. But yeah, I went to that donor and I said, look, that's our box. Blinks, buy, sell. He said, fantastic. Yes, and he wrote us a check and said, install a grid. Well, then you have another problem because then you have to build the real box. You have to build it fast because you just told that you already have the box. But that's life of an entrepreneur, right? So then we went back to the drawing board, and that's when we also hired those engineers here, and we actually built the box and we built the first grid. Now, once we had the first grid, we invited more people. It was in Shariatpur. Not just now, the world's first, and I know we call everything world's first here nowadays. That was actually true. There was no project where people had solar systems and could trade with each other anywhere in the world. So the world's first was in Shariatpur, in a village. 2 months later, the world's second came online in Brooklyn, New York. The New York Times covered that back then and called me and asked me whether we did that. And I said, I don't know what a peer-to-peer grid is, but I can tell you what we did. So it's also about, I just say, marketing and semantics. So that's how we started. And then when you have a grid, you can bring people there and say, look, it works. Now we want to do 10. Now we want to do 100, right? And that's how we grew it. And the first, what some people call here real money, meaning an institutional investor, someone who manages professionally money, not his own, but someone else's money. We got through an accelerator, which meant we were in a program which would systematically train us in everything you need to do to become investable, so to speak. And at the end of that accelerator, we raised our first investment. That was back then $1.5 million from very large energy utilities who said, hey, we would like to do this in Germany or in Portugal, but we don't know how. How is it that you're doing this in Bangladesh? Exactly what you said. And that alone, that realization, we want to understand, we want to learn. Here, it's not Germans fly in and teach Bangladesh what to do. It's the other way around. So they invested to understand what we're doing here, to figure out, okay, how could an energy future, and we're talking 10, 20, 50 years, how could the electricity system look like in Germany based on what is happening today in Bangladesh? I mean, this is pretty cool. And I think that which keeps all of the social team on its toes and motivated, because you can show the world how it's done.
So, sir, again, this exciting programs, that's what made you investors ready. What do they usually, what was your takeaway from this? What do you recommend? Yeah.
So we have incubators and accelerators, and usually you, by the word already, you cannot accelerate if there is nothing. But if there is nothing, you need an incubator. The incubator comes first, right? And I think these programs can be incredibly helpful and can also be an incredible waste of time. Because I know a few, they just hop from program to program, but they all teach the same thing more or less, right? So that doesn't really help. So I think you should only join such a program if you really benefit from the program itself, not with the goal, but at the end I may get 10,000, 50,000, whatever dollar. You should actually benefit from the program itself. And so it's also important, what kind of a program is this? Do they know anything about my market? How can they actually help me? Because if they can't, both sides will waste their time, right? So I think we have to learn to be more strategic about these things. Not, okay, I apply to everything and wherever I get in, I go. Yeah, okay, that can be a strategy, but that's not necessarily a very, intentional way to go about it. Maybe not the smartest way. Often we can't afford to say no. And I think that is a big problem. If you ask me what is one of the biggest problems here, I think that is it. Because when I travel and I speak to other entrepreneurs in other markets, they're like, no, I choose my investor, not the other way around, right? And here,
we have like thousands of startups and 2 investors. I mean, obviously, then the power, and that also means we are making concessions and we're doing what they want. One of the most important advice I got is listen to your investor and you say yes, and then you do what you want to do. Because you know, and the smart investor also knows that he will guide you, right? But he will not, at the end of the day, go into the nitty gritty and tell you how to run your company, because that's why he or she invested in you, because he or she believes that you are the best person to do this. And if she didn't, as the investor, she shouldn't have invested in the first place, right? I think we really need to understand, we don't need to say yes to everything, and we need to be intentional. What type of, do I need to raise money? Do I raise money so that the Daily Star or whoever writes the next day about me and I feel good about it for, 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Or like, you have to be very intentional about it. Or can I bootstrap it, right? So I think all of us, and I include myself, we had a reckoning. Like, you also introduced us that we raise X amount of money. Who cares?
Yeah.
What is important right now is, what is the impact and what is the scale we have or we were going to have in the next couple of years. It's not about who was the most gifted in selling his company or our company. So I think that's important. Do I really need the capital? What do I need the capital for? Okay, for this. Okay, what type of capital do I need? And how do I get it? When I would say, grants are not serious money. Yeah, but it's money. And I don't have to sell anything, but it comes at a cost, a different cost. You have to write a report. You have to do certain things. You have to maybe do things in a way you wouldn't have done other. You need to be you need to make a plan. And then, okay, this is on offer. What is the best fit? And if we don't spend enough time for that, because we are so desperate to survive and we can't afford it, and that is a big problem.
So your recommendation being to say no to peak dollar.
Yeah, but I'm also saying it's not easy. We sometimes we can't afford it, but at least we need to be conscious. Okay, there is no such thing as a free lunch, right? We all know that saying, but it's true. Even if it is a grant, it comes at a cost. Does it distract you? Because the best way of financing, and it's also a very often used phrase, is from your customers. And we see this more and more that in our entrepreneurial sector here at Bangladesh, the companies who are not in the Daily Star and whatnot, who are just calmly doing their thing, will have bootstrapping, having good revenue, they are the lucky ones right now. So we have to be. There's not black and white, right? I mean, sometimes we see money is very powerful. It can be a great leverage for that growth, but more often than not, it's maybe the wrong type of capital for your specific case.
Yeah, that makes sense.
A mentor to me once said, he said, VC capital is like rocket fuel. But if you drive a Volkswagen Golf and you put rocket fuel inside, then it may not be the best use. But the Volkswagen Golf will probably drive much longer than the rocket car. The interesting picture.
I think we can add animation to that. Sure. On our closing, what are some challenges that you face in Bangladesh personally?
Which challenge did I not face? So you can tell by now, I'm very impatient. And when I started Solshare in 2014, 2015, I was sitting next to the guy who was supposed to set up Rocket. Rocket is the owner. Yeah, no, it's also this building company which owns most of the companies here, like Food Panda and all that stuff. And I think they needed 12 weeks to get set up. You needed 18 months because I refused to pay a single. I'm not saying that they paid. I'm just saying I didn't. I refused to pay a single taka. And I remember that I would walk through the ministries, and the guys would look at me and would say, "This is very, very difficult." And they were waiting for me to say how difficult. Not only that I didn't want to, I also didn't understand it. And so my file always went back to the bottom. I mean, that obviously, that ease of doing business is even though the index may be flawed, but it's a real thing. I think it's a lot better now, but there's still so many problems. But then there is this entrepreneurial thing. When there is a place with a lot of problems, there's also a lot of opportunity. So if something is hard, it's kind of a bar and it keeps out a lot of people. So if you prevail and persevere, then possibly once you have crossed those, the opportunities are much larger. The point in case, because for a long time, we were one of the few climate startups here. We got a lot of international attention. We could attract a lot of capital into Bangladesh, right? And I always try to stress this, right? The money you are saying we raised, this is 99 point something percent of that. It's international money. That money is here. It didn't go out. It all came here. And I think that's really important. And above that number, you raised another couple of million for this rooftop solar. So it's probably around $10 million, which came here, which are here. And that's important. But yet, when I try to go out here and raise, let's say I go to a bank, they tell me, where's your Bangladeshi passport? I'm like, I didn't ask for a citizenship, I asked for a loan. So this is, I think we're making ourselves, our lives
Difficult.
really difficult. And this notion, but you have to be Bangladeshi because we have to support the Bangladeshi founders. I said, we don't have enough founders. Why do you start excluding people when we don't even have enough in the first place, right? So I think that's not very smart. And I think we make ourselves the life hard, and we underestimate how much time this costs us. And time is the most precious resource we have when we start a company.
So we are any pressure. That's your.
Yes, and also, I mean, on the policy side, I mean, the way the energy system was then designed and developed, especially during the COVID, is essentially killed our peer-to-peer model. So these are tough things, and then you have to go back to the drawing board. You have to pivot. If you have these investors, which are corporate VCs, you have to explain yourself. Right? You say, look, this went like this, but now we have that opportunity. Are you on board? Luckily, we could convince all of them to double down on this. But if we hadn't, then that would have been the end of it. Now we are stronger. So you fall, but then you also get up again, and usually then you are a bit bigger. But while on the ground, it seems like everything is impossible. And this is I think this is what you need to remind yourself, that you have more bad days as an entrepreneur than good days, right? The good days are on Facebook. And all the rest are not so good. And I think that rule you should apply when you scroll through your wall or what other people are saying. You need to remind yourself that, whenever you fall, how was it last time? Yes, I did get up, even though it seems impossible in that very moment. And this is really hard. This can be quite a strain to your personal life.
Yeah. So, personal question. We can cut this part out. Again, if I was in your shoe, if I was in a foreign country and I have to deal with all this policy,
you would just say screw.
I would exactly. Let me just go back to my nest. It's fine. I tried.
Yeah.
How do you?
No, was I thinking about it? Of course. But I also have to say, so I travel back to Germany once or twice a year for holidays, right, to see my parents. And I find it incredibly beautiful because it's where I grew up. I find it very relaxing. And after a week, I find it incredibly boring.
So Bangladesh is a challenge.
It is a challenge. Worth dedicating your life to. Worth really to try. And see, Solskjaer has now, we are about 50 people. Well, I mean, if I just turn around and walk away, that's not cool. Obviously, you want to build the company to last. You want to build the company in a way that it's not dependent. And I think we're doing a good job there, that it's becoming less and less dependent. But I don't want to give up. I can see the land, right? So, and as long as you see it, then you know that you can get there.
All right, sir. So coming back to BRAC University, could you tell us why did you pick BRAC University?
Yeah, you know, in your life, you try to scale the ladder, right? So I started at Eastern, and then I went to IOB, and then NSU, and now I'm at BRAC, right? So I'm kind of I'm saying here I'm at the pinnacle now.
All right, thanks for the validation.
We have a PhD program now, so
Exactly.
first private university. So this, but also I think what is special and what I really enjoyed the last couple of years, BRAC has is a founding partner of the Open Society University Network, or in short OSUN, and that allowed me to teach courses not only to BRAC University students but to students from across the world. So I'm teaching social entrepreneurship and social intrapreneurship. So how to change from within. Let's say you work at a BAT or at a Unilever. How can you be entrepreneurial within the organization? How can you change things from within? And we hardly talk about it. I know you're the entrepreneurship club, but if you think about it, if let's say Walmart, which is a company with a bigger market cap than the GDP of Spain.
Yeah.
So if they change their sourcing practice to more sustainable, what is the impact you have compared to starting a startup in the climate space, right? I think we need both, but we don't talk much enough about entrepreneurship. So I teach both of those courses where we basically try to teach the students, okay, how do you hold a conversation with your CEO? And fun fact is, after the course, most of the students get promoted because the first time they spoke to their CEO, they were invisible before, which is quite cool. And here we have in the classroom BRAC University in New York. We have Al-Quds in Palestine. Oh my God, we had classes while during the class the Israeli forces would storm the campus, and we had to interrupt the class. This happens all the time. That doesn't hit even Al Jazeera, because this Al-Quds University is in the West Bank. It's not in Gaza. So there's a lot happening in the West Bank which is under the radar. We have students from Myanmar. We had the earthquake last semester. We have students from South Africa, Spain, Colombia. It's really interesting, and we have all these students in the same classroom. I teach my students physically here on campus once a week, and once a week we are in the global classroom where all these universities are together, and every student picks a problem, not a solution, a problem, and then forms a team. And that can be a team only of BRAC, but it can also be an international team where they kind of compare. We had, for instance, a team, say, looked at a solution for the Rohingya refugees here together with the Palestine students who have the refugees there. And then they compared, how do we do that, which is really, I think the course benefits the most from the students learning from each other, because it's such an international crowd. And which other university can offer that here?
That's fair. That's why BRAC is the best. So what do you think, sir, about the sort of entrepreneurship that we do at BRAC University? Do you think there are some things that we can do better? Your personal recommendations?
I think we have the right organizations like your club. We have the Social Impact Lab. We have the entrepreneurship center where there's also incubation happening. I understand, right? But I think what we are not, and then we have my course, but we all exist a little bit in silos, which I think is we're not operating like a startup. We're operating more like a large organization where the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. And I think it's a bit of a loss. So I think we have the right puzzle pieces, but we haven't put the puzzle together.
Putting the puzzle together. I don't know. I think there could be a peer-to-peer solution. Sir, last question. And I always ask our guests this. If you were a student, a fourth-year student, at BRAC University, 2025, what's something that you would do? Or
so what I did when I was 25, exactly at that age, I don't know which year I was, but I did an internship in a startup. and I tried to be as close as possible to the founder, to shadow. There were two founders actually, him and her, as much as possible, and to absorb everything I could. I think that's a good way to. But you have to be able to add value, because if you just shadow, then the founder will get irritated at some point. And say, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So you kind of have to figure out, and it's the same thing. You have to identify the problem. If you ask the founder, what can I do?
Yeah.
He will look at you like, well, what do I know?
Yeah.
He will not be able to tell you probably. Maybe if he or she's very good, okay, fine, you're lucky. But let's say you should also expect the worst, right? So he'll not be able to tell you what to do. So you need to figure it out. So you need to identify the problem, and the way I think you will gain his or her trust is if you fix a problem of his without him having asked you. I think I know it's easier than done.
Yeah.
But you asked me what I would do and what I did, and I think I fairly successfully did that.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Being with us today.
Yeah.
I think we learned a lot.